Helping to develop these SaaS.
All you folks here, I'm Susan Alberter, and I'm on the committee that helps to plan these monthly events. Before we get started tonight, though, I want to remind you that next month's colloquy, are we still doing it the 3rd?
Yeah.
Thursday, on the 16th of May, Carolyn will be talking about all things planning for the new senior center. And obviously with your all's needs and wants in mind, so I'm sure she'll be taking suggestions, ideas, and putting them all into brick and mortar.
That's right.
Everything everybody wants. will
No
be there.
swimming pool.
Oh, no swimming pool, she said.
That came up today.
Oh, did it? Okay, our speaker tonight is Talon Silverhorn. Talon is a citizen of the Eastern Shawnee tribe and has been an interpreter since 2007. Looks old enough to have done much since 2007, but. So he grew up on the Shawnee Reservation in Oklahoma and participated in traditional aspects of the culture such as ceremonies, hunting traditions, and material arts. Up until this point, Talon has interpreted at various historic sites and museums across the US and Canada. It focuses on material culture and its connection to deeper cultural beliefs. He was the keynote speaker for the 2022 National Association of Interpretation Conference. And he's also been a featured speaker for several archaeological organizations, universities, and museums across the country. Talon currently serves as a naturalist supervisor for the Ohio Department of Natural Resources, supervising interpretation at John Bryan and Great Council State Park. And I think most of us are here because of Great Council and are anxious to hear what Talon has to share about the, I guess what generated the museum being built where it is, what we can look forward to, and when is it going to open? Talon?
Thank you so much for the introduction. Yeah, I'm excited to be here tonight. Can everybody hear me all right? Is the microphone working good?
Yeah.
Good.
Thank you for using it.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me pull this up here. I do have a PowerPoint. I actually, depending on your level of interest, and whether or not how many questions we get about the actual history of the site, have another PowerPoint ready to go, just in case. But we're going to talk a little bit about this Great Council State Park. I don't know if anybody here has heard about this new Great Council State Park. But first of all, I'm very glad to have been introduced, but I always like to introduce myself in Shawnee language. It's something I always make a point to do. So in Shawnee, I would say hato. You know, say hato. Hato. Haku is a lot of someone there was a lot of someone who someone yellow quick. You bought him key at the Kotoki, Omola, Miami, Oklahoma, Wayne, Oklahoma, Kokula, and also Holy Winnoka, Utah, Nikia, Kerry Silverhorn, to Clint Silverhorn, to Coco Chief, Teresa Blue Jacket, to someone Lance Silverhorn. Don't get all that? Good. So that was a pretty formal introduction that I sped through just so that we could get to this, but essentially that was a sort of layered tier of information. I told you what tribe I was from, then I told you where within that nation I was from, then I told you what clan I was from, my name, my mother, her mother, my father, and his father. So that's a very three-dimensional picture of me as a Shawnee person. If you were another Shawnee person, like the 5 other Shawnee people from Oklahoma that I ran into during the eclipse weekend at John Bryan State Park, then you would be able to sort of form some sort of thought connection. You know, one of the people that I met actually knew my father and played basketball with my uncle and knew my grandparents. And so that's why we give those types of introductions. It's exactly for that purpose, right? And that's sort of what, we're gonna sort of keep rolling on this topic of Great Council. But at Great Council, these are the types of introductions that I'm really hopeful are going to be happening. I'm gonna try my best to not block the screen and also not keep my back to this camera here, since we do have some people on Zoom tonight. This is a rendering of what Great Council State Park, the Interpretive Center, will look like when it's finished. I don't know if any of you have driven by the site recently, but it's getting there. It is coming along. This project started more than 3 years ago now, and it has been through several iterations. I remember hearing the initial projections for budget and some of the initial scope. We had maybe enough money to build a very small sort of air-conditioned space and have some interpretive signage. And since then, it's sort of just continued to grow into something really unique and really special. I remember when I first came to this project, I was working as an interpreter with the Colonial Williamsburg Foundation in Virginia. And this was August when I first joined these meetings. My chief, Glenn Wallace, reached out and asked if I would be willing to sit in on these meetings and just give some historical background and perspective on the site. And I did. Williamsburg, I don't know if any of you have been to the coast of Virginia, but in August, you can practically swim through the air. And I was very glad to have a few hours out of my day to sit in and listen to this project. And, you know, I was pulling some resources together, getting some of the 18th century history of this site together for the sort of background of this project. And, you know, as it continued to grow and as it continued to expand, we decided that there needed to be somebody present to actually be here and look after this project. So I packed up and moved from Virginia, applied for the job and got the job. And so I've been helping with the development of Great Council before it was ever called Great Council. I actually wrote that as one of the potential list of names that the governor chose from. You know, before we knew what the building was going to look like, before we knew what was going to be interpreted there, I've seen every bit of this project from beginning to hopefully finish. And as this continues to develop, you can see the siding that's going on up here, that multicolored wood grain siding. I was actually just talking to somebody, that's actually printed aluminum. So the entirety of this structure, the entirety of this this building, this interpretive center, almost 13,000 square feet, is designed to look sort of in the style of an 18th century council house. These council houses are places within Shawnee communities and within many traditional Eastern Woodlands communities that serve as kind of our civic centers, our meeting houses, our churches, our community space. And so I really wanted this to be a place that felt that it belonged to the community, and that encouraged conversation and debate and discourse and all the things that go along with people meeting. So that's what the building is sort of designed after. If I go back, you can kind of see the sort of framework structure. You know, those traditional longhouses are log framed. Oftentimes white pine is the preferred wood for that. And then, you know, the sort of rafter structure is then covered with bark shingling, and there are doors on either end. And so this building is sort of intentionally designed with Shawnee traditional architecture in mind, to not only pay honor to the history of the site, but to highlight sort of the purpose of it as a contemporary space as well. That's just the, I said, the siding that's going on. And I did mention that that is printed aluminum. So all of the materials in the building, this is all solid steel. It is solid steel set in solid concrete. I remember, you know, before the glass went in, this building is just absolutely bomb-proof. You know, the basement level is completely done in the same concrete, but you know, this building is really cool. Our names are actually signed on the there's a beam right up at the top, the last one that got put in. We all got to write our names on it while it was craned in and finally welded in place. But it is a really cool homage to our traditional council houses. Here's the inside. So this is looking from the second floor This is on the second floor looking up to the central skylight. Oftentimes in these council houses, there are several sort of smoke holes or openings, but there's usually one right in the center. And this is where a lot of, traditionally, a lot of important speeches and things are made. In that fire is usually cast things like tobacco and other offerings, and the smoke from those is important to let it sort of out. You can see some of the floors as they're being worked on here on the second level. The entirety of the building, the floors are done in a really nice polished concrete that has a sort of larger aggregate in it. And so it looks really nice and clean and somewhat natural, fits really well kind of in the theme of the building. As you've driven by it, here's 68 outlined in red right here. And then this property right here, this is where the interpretive center sits. And then everything sort of outlined in that purple up to there is what we own as part of the state park itself, about 15 acres. This pink line is actually a trail. It's about a half-mile trail loop that goes from the back of the interpretive center out and then actually connects to a trail, an existing trail that Little Miami Conservancy operates and connects directly to the river. So we do have access to that. Here's kind of some draft imagery and layout that you might see on some of the trail signage. That pink trail is named the Blackfish Trail for Chief Blackfish, who was there at the community in the 18th century and sort of looking after the town. And they'll be installed probably with these 45-degree reader rails that are common to see in a lot of our state parks. Here's the rest of that property that I was talking about. So this outlined in red is the 15 acres that we currently own, including this little stretch that goes across 68 to the bike trail, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then that green line is the Little Miami Conservancy property that connects directly to the river. And so you can see these purple lines are the trail system that's going to be there at Great House. Not extensive, but then again, it's not necessarily a John Bryan or Cedar Creek or Hocking Hills. This is a little bit different. So we're going to kind of get into some of the internal exhibits. So I'm sure driving by, you know, you've been able to see the building change and grow, not necessarily seeing what's going on the inside. So I want to give you a look at what's going on the inside of this building. This is the map key for level 1. This is ground level. As you were to enter the front doors right here, there are the restrooms, which will be accessible 24/7. The front doors will be unlocked. People riding on the bike trail, passing by will have access to those restrooms and drinking water and that kind of stuff. But then these interior doors will be locked off hours. This is the reception desk at 3C. And then here's kind of right under that skylight, right in the middle of that 1A, the stairs immediately over here to the left. This is the south side of the building. That kind of funky looking feature that you see on the south side, that's actually a living stream. I don't know if anybody's been like to Patel Darby Metro Park near Columbus, but our director really loved that idea and wanted to bring something like that to Great Council. And she said, I love it, I want it. What are you gonna do with it? And so we'll talk about what we're gonna do with it here in a second. But the building, I sort of bifurcated the building into kind of thematic halves. So the south side of the building in green is all about the Shawnee community interacting with the natural world, right? So interacting with the natural landscape with sort of plants, animals, traditional uses for plants, the fur trade, the use of Ohio's riverways and waterways for travel, for transportation, for interaction with other communities, and sort of as a lifeline of our traditional lifestyle. And then over here on this side, this curved feature right here is actually a theater with kind of bench seating. The screen is this flat area right here. So it's kind of an open air theater that will show a 12 to 15 minute introductory film. It's being produced by Argentine Productions out of Pittsburgh. They have a lot of experience working with tribal communities. And so we spent a lot of time not only here in Ohio filming with residents around Old Town, but also in Oklahoma, filming with tribal citizens from the three Shawnee tribes. And so they were really nice to work with on that. And then the rest of this space, there are some art, kind of kids level art activities that highlight how our traditional arts like ribbon work and some weaving and that kind of stuff influenced by our connection to natural resources. And then of course, like things like family structure. So this corner here is sort of meant for people to compare and contrast historical family structure within the Shawnee community and with other communities. And so this first floor is kind of an introductory level to the Shawnee world. So this, I don't know if you can see that tiny little map down there, but this, as you walk in the front doors and turn immediately left, right? That sort of introduction to that living stream, actually, you can see a corner, a little bit of it over there. This is the elevator, and that whole wall starts off with this sort of cutout shape of a canoe and this sort of 3D cutout of a historic, a 1753 map of the area, including the Little Miami River. And just sort of highlighting again that connection to the landscape, why our towns are built along waterways, why are these places so important, and how did our community historically use them. So here's sort of a mock-up of that. This is actually done in a really nice looking sort of ply, like a birch ply, and then it is router cut out. The wall behind it is painted this ODNR blue, and so, you can actually see that blue showing through in the waterways, which is really cool. But like I said, this is actually taken from a trader's map sometime before 1753 that actually shows the area right here. Old Chillicothe is like right here, center frame on that map, even though it's not there yet and won't be there for another 20 years or so. But this kind of gives you an idea of what that might look like. Here's kind of a security cam view, if you will, of that same area over here on the, which this showed up on the screen, but over here on the right side of the screen is what I just showed you. And then right in the middle of the frame is the living stream. Now, ours is not as big as Battelle Darby Creek's. Theirs is about 55 feet long. Ours is about 20, 25 feet long. But still, it is sort of meant to be a representation of the ecology of the Little Miami River. And it will have fish in the stream. We have some really cool sculpting and artwork being done by a company called Optic Nerve and the Bureau Group who specialize in this. They're actually the ones, if you've ever been to the Toledo Zoo, they did the aquatic features and the kind of sculpting that you see at the Toledo Zoo. So expect that here. So here we have some display cases. We're working on loans right now with the Ohio History Connection. They are going to loan us some historical artifacts, including 18th century firearms, hopefully traps if we can identify some in the collection, and then other things. The one thing that we're really working on right now and would love to get finalized is a pipe tomahawk that was reportedly presented by Tecumseh to Galloway, and that will be on display at Great Council if we can work through the loan agreement. And then this kind of points here, where this guy is standing along here, just outside the window, we have a water retention area. It's not a pond, it won't stay wet, but of course it is required to have that sort of water slow down, that water retention area. And so it will encourage a lot of plant growth. We're going to be planting entirely native species at Great Council, obviously, but another cool layer to that is that we've really tried to select plants that are historically or culturally significant to Shawnee people as well. So a lot of the plants that you're going to see in the landscape are ones that we have a cultural connection to or historical connection to. And then this sort of large case over here, the casework in the corner, that is an exhibit about the 18th century fur trade and the economy that Shawnee people were participating in. This goes into a little bit more depth again about the living stream. So some of the species that are going to be in there. This is actually from Exhibit Concepts, who are doing a lot of the printing and signage. There's going to be a fun little kind of hide and seek, if you will, in the stream itself. So One of my original concepts for the living stream was to create a sort of interactive timeline. So at the very beginning of the stream, where like the water is sort of bubbling up, I wanted it to be, to sort of focus on different points of Shawnee history. So from the very kind of beginning, the spring, I wanted to kind of highlight our creation story. And then as you went along the stream, you would get different bits and pieces of our sort of cultural evolution through different time periods. And so as you did, in front of you, in the stream substrate somewhere, there would be a projectile point, like an arrowhead or spear point hidden in the rocks of the stream that sort of represented that time period, whether they be paleo, archaic, middle to late woodland, historic period, all the way up until today. And so I wanted it to kind of represent that. They'll still be in there, but they will be a little bit more focused on just general time periods and the sort of archaeology that they represent. And I don't know if you can kind of see, but there are some trees, some artificial trees kind of just next to the living stream. And here you can see we've got some small panels on each tree that identifies what the tree is. So for example, pin oak and its scientific name, and then its environment and what it was historically used for. So everything kind of fits into both natural and historical throughout the building. There's the living stream in progress right now. It looks glorious, I know. But it really is cool to see in person. I mean, this tall section as it is right there is probably about this tall. So, I mean, for children who are going to be looking at it, or people in wheelchairs, it is going to be a very, very neat view. And then this little cutout that you can see is actually a pass under the living stream that you can get in and actually look at the fish from below. You can kind of see it over there, but yeah, it's going to be pretty interesting. Here's some of the sculpting being done. So this is kind of the surroundings of the living stream that's going to go, in that space. So you can see the rocks and trees and see where those panels are going to go and that kind of stuff. But like I said, Bureau Group and Optic Nerve are doing a really, really good job on bringing this to life.
Why is there a Dairy Queen?
Oh, yeah, up there. That's just in their studio. It's just in the background. I always love going and visiting. I was in Columbus 2 weeks ago, looking at one of the larger pieces that were being constructed for the second floor exhibits. And it's always fun to see like these sort of like arts and fabrication shops that are like doing this kind of exhibit, work, fiberglass and silicone molding and all this stuff. They're working on so many different things at once. I walked in and there was a giant beaver over here, and there was like, some car parts over here and mini golf, sets over here. And then there was like a giant, like 18th century Shawnee house in the back.
That's not in Xenia, you're saying?
No, this is not in Xenia. No, this will go there. So this sort of more natural looking right here, the stones and the trees that you see, that will all be the surroundings of the living stream. It's sort of, rendered here just for the sake of expediency, but this is what it actually looks like. So, yeah. So going down to level 0, this is the basement gallery, although I don't necessarily think basement's the right word for it. This is a living space, and that is kind of the best description for it because we don't have any permanent exhibits here in level 0. This is meant to be kind of a community gallery, and early on, our administration brought up the idea of hosting traveling exhibits. I've been working with museums for almost 10 years, and traveling exhibits are really cool and really nice, but they require a lot of trust and a lot of insurance. And so most of the time when you're getting traveling exhibits, you need, a lot of places will require about 9 months or so of operational or environmental data for your building. So they want to know like what the humidity and temperature averages were over the last 9 months, what the UV ratings for your glass is, what kind of security systems do you have, what kind of insurance policies are you willing to take? You know, I mean, so these are all kinds of things that in a brand new site with no history of operations, it's tough to convince a museum to loan us artifacts or to loan us, you know, traveling exhibits and that kind of stuff. So, you know, I threw out a lot of ideas for sort of the first round of what we could do in there. But the one I really pushed for and the one that we are doing is a photo gallery. So we'll start with a photo gallery of the modern day Shawnee community in Oklahoma. And this will explore sort of layers of identity. The first layer, so the title of the exhibit is From Monolith to Mosaic, Reshaping the Identity of Native America. And then it goes through 3 different sort of layers of depth. There are about 20 portraits, large color portraits in the gallery, along with some scenery of Northeast Oklahoma where we currently live, and some other action shots and that kind of stuff. But it's really focused on the people themselves. And so the 3 layers go from native or indigenous identity. So what does that mean to you? Like, what does that, you know, how is this perceived? And then the second layer is your national identity, your tribal identity. You know, how does that work? And, you know, what does this mean to Americans or to other people who are going to be interacting with us? And then the final layer is the individual identity, the person themselves. So beyond knowing that they are native, beyond knowing that they are Shawnee, what do you know about me? You know, what do I want people to see about me? You know, my artwork, my computer skills, my historical research, what do I want to be recognized for as a person, right? Beyond any other labels. So that's what this photo gallery kind of explores, from a multitude of different tribal perspectives. Hopefully it's a good sort of introduction, you know, to these different people who provided their pictures and their experiences for this. And then this will be owned by the Ohio History Connection. And so this will actually go, once it leaves Great Council, probably more than a year out, it will actually go to travel around to other Ohio History Connection sites and be on display. So if you don't get to catch it here, which I hope you do, you'll have the opportunity to see it around Ohio and other OHC sites. I'm not sure why this is blurry, but this is the second floor. So we've talked about the first floor, some of the exhibits that are going in there. We've talked about the lower gallery. It's sort of the initial plan for that space. Now we're going to be talking about the upper floor, or the story loop, as we've kind of been calling it. This is the one that really kind of follows the most close to like a museum format. This is the one where the elevators are those kind of squares, or the elevators that kind of square up there. There are 2 stairwells on either end of the building, and the central stairwell as all entry points to the exhibit. So even though it is technically a chronological loop, we're not necessarily encouraging that you start at a specific point. You can kind of enter the story at any point in time and be able to sort of come full circle. So, but starting in A, if you were to exit the elevator or this south stair, for example, you might start at that intro kiosk. And that has a sort of model, not necessarily of the village, but of structures, traditional buildings that would be represented in this community in the 1770s. So things like the bark dome house, the longhouse itself that Great Council's modeled after, and then some other cabin style structures that would have been common to see during the period. Kind of talking about, you know, the influences and the people that are living in these communities, and then kind of giving your gallery guide, like your guide to translations, because every exhibit panel in this building has a Shawnee title first and an English title second. Shawnee wayfinding for the bathrooms and for stairs and in the building. So Shawnee language is all over the building, and that is because of our involvement with the Shawnee tribes. And so that's there. Your guide to some of the color palettes are there as well, because as you're going from kind of section to section, this rotates seasonally. So in this initial part, what's labeled B, after you leave the intro, you enter into the early the early years, the early history. So does anybody know what the oldest documentable human evidence in Ohio's borders is? It's about 13 to 15,000 years. In our periphery, at places like Meadowcroft Rock Shelter, it's about 19,000 years. So quite a long time that people have been here in the area. So it goes sort of an overview of that, sort of the ancient history of people here in our area, all the way through Adena and Hopewell and sort of these archaeological cultures that people are familiar with. And the reason we're highlighting this, not necessarily going into any great depth, there are plenty of places in Ohio that you can go and explore. Actually, we highlight several of them, like our UNESCO World Heritage sites, that you can go and learn about those archaeological cultures with much greater space and resources than we have to devote to here. But we definitely want to show that these traditions and these cultures laid the sort of identity and sort of cultural groundwork for a lot of other tribal nations that came after, like Shawnee, Miami, Kickapoo, etc. So we want to make that connection. And from there, we sort of start this timeline from beginning of colonization through this story of, Shawnee identity in Ohio and through removal into Oklahoma. So at sea, you will transition from the early history and the archaeology of Ohio into the sort of end of the Fort Ancient to begin colonization. And some of the main story points that we're talking about there would be like the Beaver Wars and the beginnings of control of natural resources and more geopolitical warfare with Europeans and sort of the foundations and political relationships that are being built. So people like the Shawnee, the Six Nations, the Delaware, the Wyandotte, you'll be introduced to all of these names and identities there. And that shape, that C that you see right there, that is a 17-foot wide, 9.5 foot tall bark dome house, what we call a and it is inside kind of set dressed like a Shawnee family is living there. There are beds along the wall, there's personal items, and it will rotate through seasonally. So every time you come back, if you come back in the spring, the summer, the winter, or the fall, you'll see different things inside that space that are relevant to what Shawnee people are doing seasonally during that. In the corner, just down here, there's a sort of small space that we didn't necessarily want to leave blank. And this was a good opportunity, as we're talking about the history of Shawnee people, to kind of focus on some misunderstandings and some of the sort of popular misrepresentations of all American Indian people, but specifically as it relates to Shawnee. Sort of our sources of information, books, mostly like historical fiction novels, movies, plays, a lot of entertainment, this is where a lot of people get their information about specifically American Indian people. Here in Ohio, I know that there are a lot of popular fiction series that focus on this sort of time period. So we wanted to address some of that and sort of compare what is historically factual and documentable with what is kind of popular, So that's where that'll be done. And then from this entire back wall that you see labeled in D in red, that is the history of Old Chillicothe, the village that was there from 1777 to 1780. And, this is a pretty interesting site. Even though it has a short history of about 3 years, there is quite a bit that goes on there. Quite a bit of interesting history. I bet you know the name Simon Kenton. I bet you know the name Daniel Boone. You probably know the name Blackfish or Cornstalk. These are all names that you're going to find in that history. One name in particular that you're not going to find is Tecumseh. If anyone's interested after we get through this, we can talk about the history of this site and sort of, what we do know about it. But this last section here, after you learn about our early history and the archaeology of Ohio, the beginnings of colonization and sort of the geopolitics of our relationship with other nations, whether they be tribal or colonizing, and then the history of Old Chillicothe. Why did it move to the Little Miami River? What was their life like in that 3 years, and then why did life at Old Chillicothe end. You will learn about Shawnee's removal from Ohio. So what are some of the documentable kind of footpaths for Shawnee people ebbing and flowing out of Ohio, eventually landing in Oklahoma. And then this section in yellow here in E focuses on our life today. So this is all about Shawnee life today from the 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribes. Here are some of the exhibit elements for the upstairs. Scattered throughout the second floor, actually, if I go back, these little kind of dark green dots starting there, here, and here. Those are character panels, and these are kind of sprinkled in. We really put some thought into how best to incorporate the stories of individuals, people that you probably know and people that you may or may not know. And so, you know, what we're doing here is we have these sort of pairs of panels. And if you look up at the top, that sort of white strip with the blue or purple design in it, that is reminiscent of our traditional wampum belts. These wampum belts are historical methods of recording information. And, you know, these symbols represent a man and a woman. And so for each character panel, there's usually two characters paired up. So for example, we might highlight Chief Cornstalk, but then right next to him, we're going to highlight his sister, Nahulema, who was also a powerful and influential figure in her lifetime, and, you know, had a pretty good story to tell as well. Right next to Simon Kenton, we're also highlighting Caesar, who was a black man who lived with Shawnee people and was recorded as an interpreter and translator, and shows up several times in the historical record, even mentioned by Simon Kenton himself. Is credited as the reason he survived one of his captures by Shawnee people. Right next to Daniel Boone, we're highlighting Chief Blackfish, who Boone references, you know, in his journals, and who, you know, we're sort of, you know, trying to find out more about his life and experiences. Right next to Tecumseh, we're highlighting his older sister, Tecumpias, who raised him and raised his other 6 siblings, who I'm willing to bet a lot of people haven't heard about, you know, and sort of what their family life and dynamics were like. What was the impact of this tumultuous time on family structure? You know, growing up in a home that wasn't secure, that could have been destroyed at any point in time. As a matter of fact, his home was destroyed about 3 times before he was 12 years old. Being raised by his older sister because his mother left for Missouri to be with some of the first Shawnee people living in Cape Girardeau. You know, so we're highlighting not only these individuals, but what they tell us about deeper parts of Shawnee culture, like family structure, how we interact with outsiders, people who are not Shawnee, how people are dealing with weighty political responsibility. These are all sort of case studies, if you will, but highlighting two figures who have different experiences in the same realm. Does that make sense? Someone like Simon Kenton and Caesar are both outsiders, but they're being treated very differently. You know, so that's kind of the idea here. And then this is sort of some of the other panels, and then large graphics. We have very large graphics, you know, some of them, you know, 6 to 12 feet that have nice historical art. We have, luckily, several good historical artists like Robert Griffin and John Buxton, you know, and those kind of folks who do these really beautiful paintings of our communities here in the Eastern Woodlands and in Ohio. And, you know, they've been gracious enough to let us use their artworks in helping tell the story. So, and then here you can see some of the Shawnee language on all 3 of these panels. For example, and then there are 2 versions of that. Shawnee people have not had a written language for very long, or written version of our language for very long, and so we still don't have a complete consensus on how to write our language. So between the 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribes, there are a multitude of ways that we read and write in that language. And so trying to work with all 3 tribes' language departments and fluent speakers to try and come up with as close as we can to an agreement on how best to represent the language was a challenge, and it was it was a lot of work, but like, this is what we've been able to settle on, is having these two different versions of it represented. So, and if you were a Shawnee person coming through the exhibits and you were able to read this, you know, some of these titles are a little bit more poetic in Shawnee than they are kind of blankly, like the end of Old Town, for example, here. You know, means like, we're leaving this place to go to Pickwick. We're leaving this place to go to Pickwick. Or roles and responsibilities, means like we all do our best to help each other, right? So you kind of get the idea that in Shawnee, they have a little bit more poetry sprinkled into them. Here's a sort of glance. If you were just getting off the elevator, this is what you would see just stepping off the elevator on the second floor. So here's that model that I talked about. It has some of the structures of the town. And here's another sort of interactive element that's just behind it. These are actually sort of 3D printed models that are movable. So there's kind of a landscape that's identified here. There'll be some interpretation here and some instructions, but it's essentially like a floodplain near the river. So the river, the floodplain of the river, some high ground, and then some, you know, some other sort of landscape features. And you have all these village parts, including like cornfields and homes and council houses and all this stuff. And it's the idea that, you know, we want people, especially kids, to think about sort of the intentional planning of these communities along these waterways. You know, would you build your homes or your council house or your food storage right on the river or right in the floodplain? Or would you put it up maybe a little bit away on a higher plot of land and use that floodplain for farming and that kind of stuff, you know? So we want to highlight some of the thought that goes into building these communities. There you can see on the right or on the left, some of that historical art that I was talking about. That is a painting called Boulder Gap Falls by Doug Hall. In the center, just behind these two figures, you can see that section talking about the contemporary tribes and that nice illuminated sort of band that goes around if you were to look at it from the top, this section actually represents one of our traditional symbols. It has these sort of 4 crosses and 4 circles. You know, we sort of interpret it as a symbol of community. And so you see that represented in this. If you just took that 2-dimensional and raised it up and made it 3-dimensional, this is what it would look like. And so we have a fire feature, not real fire, but like a stylistic fire in the middle that represents the heart of the community. And then our 3 tribal communities, you know, sort of scattered around that. And then you can see some of those dual panels, the character panels, and then this other large kind of interactive, which we'll get to in just a second. But this is what the second floor kind of looks like as you're stepping off the elevator. Here's the other side of it. If you were to turn it around and face this way, so you can see that 17 by 9 wigwam there, and on the opposite side, some of the panels on the walls there. This is what it looks like as you are sort of entering that wigwam there. There's some benches. There's seating all throughout. Everything is wheelchair accessible. Everything is on grade. There's no changes in elevation really on any of the floors. You know, there's seating scattered around everywhere. So we've made sure to include that. Here are some of the pieces that are going to be going inside that home. We were sort of wondering how best to interpret the seasonality of Shawnee life. And we thought about everything from panels, like we print panels specifically for the seasons, maybe that would be printed. The History Connection has a machine that will let you print on basically anything. And so we thought it would be cool to kind of stretch a deer hide on a frame and actually print the interpretive panels on that deer hide, which we are doing in another part of the building. But you know, as we were kind of working through this, this idea of these trade chests came up, these sort of large, almost document boxes, but these trunks came up. And we thought it would be cool to kind of contain the seasons in that. So there are 4, as you walk in, are standing in front of the exhibit. there's the set dressing here and the windows behind you. If you were sitting on the bench, you'd be looking at this in front of you. There would be 4 chests, 4 trunks, and on the lid of each of these trunks would be a panel talking about the season that they represent. So spring, summer, fall, and winter. And then a short blurb about what a Shawnee family might be doing during that season. So things like in the springtime, we start off our spring after midwinters with, after we tap trees and make maple sugar, after we go turkey hunting, fishing, coming back to the community, our ending with our spring green corn, into summer, when we start thinking about planting our fields and we start sort of revitalizing our larger villages. And so, we just sort of flow through this interpretation of what we're doing in the year. And then there's a plexiglass sort of barrier. We're having tribal artists, not just Shawnee, but Miami, Seneca, Ottawa, Cherokee, etc., produce some objects for us. So like some of the stuff like rattles and dolls and historical pieces of clothing, a twined hominy making bag, all these kinds of things. Those are going sort of under the plexiglass on display. And then on top, there will be objects that are available to pick up and handle that are relevant to those seasons. Like in the springtime, you might be able to pick up and actually look at a sumac spile that is used for tapping maple trees to make sugar, or you might be able to pick up and shake a rattle, and learn about our robin dance, in the springtime, or something along those lines. So, yeah. Here's another one of the big interactives on the second floor, kind of opposite the balcony and elevators. This was another sort of highlight on one side of this. On the opposite side of this, there's a row of benches, and then there's 2 character panels focusing on Simon Kenton Caesar and Daniel Boone Blackfish. And then we have a lot of kind of information about Old Town right there in that little knot. And that is specifically so that when we're doing tours or having programs, we can seat people there, on those benches and be surrounded by content and imagery and information about that village site. And then on the opposite side of it here is an interactive activity where, I don't know if you've ever been to playgrounds where they have those kind of spinning blocks that are multicolored, or the tic-tac-toe that's on the spinning tubes. That's kind of what this is. But the idea is that they're bicolored. They're white on one side and they're purple on the other side, and they represent the beads on waffle belts. So there will be some historical designs and interpretations of those designs that kids or families can sort of look at and draw inspiration from. And then we encourage people to sort of, mess with it and create their own designs and create their own meaning in what they're trying to get across. Because, learning to communicate without written word and learning to build permanence without written word in a culture built on oral tradition is something that we really do want to highlight. So here's some more. This is that modern day section. So on the left, you can see a rendering of it standalone, just as it is. You can see that central fire feature. You can see the ribbon work banners that are going to go around the top of it. Ribbon work is a traditional art form practiced by a lot of eastern woodlands and sort of prairie communities where this imported silk ribbon, really delicate, lightweight stuff, is applique sewn to clothing like leggings and skirts and shirts and moccasins and hats and all kinds of stuff. But it is meticulously cut and folded. It's sort of stitched origami. So like we're taking and cutting the ribbon, folding it to create patterns and designs, and then stitching that down onto clothing and building it up in layers to create really intricate, complex patterns. So it's sort of a staple of our traditional arts, that form of embroidery, and it's really cool. We wanted to highlight it, and it really fit well there. Here's some of the framework that's being constructed for that right now at Exhibit Concepts in Dayton. So Exhibit Concepts is doing a lot of the fabrication for most of our exhibits. They're out of Vandalia. I say Dayton just because it's easier, but they're based in Vandalia, and they're doing a lot of the construction and fabrication and install for our exhibits. And those are the flags of the 3 federally recognized Shawnee tribes that will be represented there. That's all I have about great council. Not all, but that is what I wanted to get through at least today. And now the rest of our time can be spent talking about it, answering questions, seeing what you all may be interested in. Yeah.
I have a question about language. There are three different tribes. Are they different enough that they have different dialects, different ways of speaking? You said they had different ideas about writing down the language, but I'm curious whether there are differences. Of course, they're dialects, so they're mutually intelligible, but is there a difference among their dialects or not?
That's a good question. So the question was, between the three Shawnee tribes, are there different dialects of the Shawnee language? And the answer is sort of yes. So because of the history of removal for our communities, we sort of took three different paths into Oklahoma. There were three Shawnee reservations established here in Ohio prior to removal: Lewistown, Hog Creek, and Wapakoneta. Those were the three Shawnee reservations. And so we were removed by reservation essentially to Kansas, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So because of our historical interactions with other tribal communities, like the Eastern Shawnees or the Lewistown Shawnees, our heavy interaction with Senecas and Mohawks and more Iroquoian communities, we have some cultural rub-off even in our language there that goes both ways. The absentee Shawnee or the Hog Creek, what would be more closely the Hog Creek Shawnees, you'll see little bits and pieces more closely aligned with things like Kickapoo. And so some of the difference in our language dialects comes from what other tribal communities we have strong interactions with, like Miami or Kickapoo or Mohawk or Seneca. So that will create slight differences. And then because of our separation today, the Eastern Shawnee tribe is in the far northeast of Oklahoma. The Shawnee tribe is in Miami, Oklahoma, and the absentee Shawnee tribe is south of Oklahoma City in Shawnee, Oklahoma. And we've been living apart for, more than 100 years. And so that has created some drift within our language, not to the point that we're not able to communicate with each other, but, one of our communities might say, and the other one might say, so it's just slight differences. I remember even going up to Canada while I was up there for the anniversary of Tecumseh's death at Moraviantown, at Bucktown, interacting with some folks up there who were Shawnee descendants and, who had just stayed in Bucktown after the War of 1812. Listening to them speak and trying to talk with them, it was funny because they sounded like all the other people from Southern Ontario while they were speaking English. And then the minute they started speaking Shawnee, it was like they had a thick French accent on top of their Shawnee.
Wow.
So that even in the short amount of time that we've been apart, there has been a little bit of drift in our language. I wouldn't say to the point that they're different dialects, but there are some sort of regional differences in slang. Do you say soda, pop, Coke? Is it a shopping cart or is it a buggy? So that's the sort of language differences that we have.
Thank you.
What else?
I think you indicated that there was going to be some communication between the bike trail or the recreation trail and the.
Let's go back to that slide. So when we're talking about land, I was talking about the bike trail earlier. Here we go. I was talking about the bike trail earlier. I think I heard some oohs and ahs when I mentioned the bike trail. It is a very popular feature in our area, and we wanted to make sure that we had a connection there. I haven't seen the latest in renderings or in projections or schedule, but I will say with this strip of land that we have right here, we do have currently an on-grade crossing across 68. So we do have, if you drive through there, you'll notice a flashing crossing sign and such like that, the same kind that is like out here on the street we have there. And the plan is eventually we will have a permanent, really nice looking bridge that connects directly from the bike trail straight to the front doors of Great Council State Park.
Wow.
So, we're working on that right now. You know, our leadership and ODOT's leadership are working on that agreement, and the budget for it, and, you know, how that's going to work. And I think originally the first idea that got brought up was a tunnel. And very quickly ODOT said, that's great if you want people to swim to Great Council. Yeah, but some of the, I mean, the renderings that I had seen for the bridge itself, were just really cool. So one of the renderings had a straight path, like you would pull off the bike path, dismount your bike, walk over a nice covered bridge that had our logos and tribal seals across it. And then you would sort of meander. There was a sort of winding path down, not only for the fact that obviously you have to have a certain degree of slope and maintain that for ADA purposes, but also gives us more sort of room to have native plantings and garden space and that kind of stuff there as well. So right here, imagine a sort of on-ramp, bridge crossing, and then sort of garden area on the sort of exit, and that leads right to the front of Great Council. So that's the plan. I don't have any.
Cross 68?
It goes over 68.
It does?
Yes. Yep. So, yeah. What else? Yes.
I've got two questions. When are you opening? And the other one is, parking situation.
Yeah. So.
Do you have, or can you use any of that green space for parking, or?
That's a good question. So, currently we have a parking lot, right here to the north of the, interpretive center. I think there are, somewhere between 20 and 30 parking spaces there. We're working on acquiring more, property for parking. But that is gonna be one thing that, you know, we know we're limited on. Currently, as we've been doing things and planning for things like grand opening, Old Town Reserve, the Greene County Park that's across the street, the church that is right next door, and the Xenia Township office have all been very generous in letting us use their parking. But we're hopeful that we can get some more land on this side of the street, and that would allow us to expand the parking. So that's one thing that I know we're pretty keenly aware of. And then grand opening, a question that I've been dodging for the last 45 minutes. No, really I haven't. Grand opening is scheduled for June 7th. So Great Council State Park will have its grand opening Friday, June 7th. Sometime around 10 a.m. is what we're sort of trying to lock in right now. We're working on the details. So I see a lot of phones coming out, a lot of notes being taken. But yeah, we're working on that. Our tribal representatives are putting together, you know, their groups that are going to be coming up from Oklahoma. We're working on the schedule of events for that day. I have been working on the programming schedule. Our director wants to make sure that we have a full day of interpretation, a well-staffed interpretive center. So I'm planning on having, so not only will we have the ribbon cutting ceremony itself, and sort of the unveiling of the site, we will have programs inside the building throughout the day. We will have tours going on. We will have interpreters outside, other naturalists and things, you know, along the trail. The Little Miami, or our scenic river staff will also be, you know, available interpreting on that river trail. We're working on food trucks. We're working on transportation, parking. The Greene County Fairgrounds has allowed us to use their parking for the event. We have shuttle buses running. So we're preparing for grand opening. We're getting everything together right now. So working on finding entertainment, all of that. Yeah.
What are the days and hours that the center will be open, and how many permanent staff will be on site during the opening, and do they act as guides?
That's a good question. So the question was, what are the days and hours? So what's the operation schedule? And then what's the staffing look like at Great Council? So for hours, for days and hours, we're thinking about being open Wednesday through Sunday, closed Monday, Tuesday. And we would have the rough schedule that we've put together I've been sort of putting forward proposals for what the schedule could look like. The one that seems to be the most favorable would be regular business hours, 9 to 5 most days, with some exceptions. I've made sure to include some early open times, or at least some like hour and a half blocks right before open and after open some days, trying to work with the Xenia or the Xenia area Academy for Learning Differences, if that's the name, I can't remember, to schedule some tours or some times that people with sensitivities to light, sound, crowds, or people who just need a little bit more time. Tactile experiences. I'm having some things 3D printed, artifacts 3D printed so that people can have hands-on experiences in the site. We can control the light levels, we can control the sound levels. So trying to include as much sensory programming as possible. So that's affecting the hours, but 9 to 5 most days, long hours on Thursday, and then short day on Sunday. So 12 to 5 on Sunday, for example. Yeah, and then staffing wise for Great Council, we have currently two full-time staff, not including your park manager and assistant park manager. That 2 full-time staff would include myself and Ryan DeMisa, who's our full-time naturalist, full-time interpreter at the site. And then we have 4 what are called tour guide positions posted for Great Council. 2 of which I think 1 or 2 of which have been filled currently. Those are 1,000-hour positions that, rather than going with something like a naturalist aide, because these are all union positions whose job titles and duties are pretty well laid out already. The tour guide position allowed us a little bit more functionality or flexibility because we have a point of sale system in the building. They can work that cash register and also give tours and interpret in the building. So, and then obviously we're expecting that there will be no shortage of people who would like to volunteer at Great Council. So we're leaving plenty of room for that with training. That is something that I would like to do. Anybody who is going to volunteer, I would like to spend some time with, make sure that they know the history of the site and see what they would be interested in doing, whether that be helping with gardening, helping with grounds maintenance, helping with facility, tours, historical interpretation, whatever it may be. Plenty of variety at Great Council. But on opening day, we will have, we put the call out statewide for other interpreters, naturalists. I know we've got people coming, like I said, full-time naturalists from other state parks who are going to be out and about on the grounds, interpreting the natural resources of the site. We have people like myself, Ryan, Jacob Bledsoe, and Roberta Beyer, who's our assistant park manager, interpreting inside the building on the more historical and cultural aspects of it. And then we've got, like I said, our 4 tour guide positions who will be around. And then we have several other people, like I know Bobby was reaching out to the master gardeners to see if they would be willing to be volunteers on that day, get some volunteer hours to help with some of the outdoor tours and experiences. So we shouldn't have any shortage of hands on grand opening day. Sure.
Is there an entrance fee, or you mentioned the cash register?
Yeah, cash register. So one thing I didn't bring up in this is retail. So just like any other state park, Great Council will be free to visit. But we do have some stuff for sale. So we have historical maps. I ordered, I think it was 100 prints to start with of 9 different historical maps of the area from the 18th century. So you can take home really nice color gloss print posters of historical maps from the time period of the area. We have reprints of some historical books and firsthand sources like the Journal of Daniel Boone, Jonathan Alder, people who were alive during the period and sort of published their life stories. And then we also have things like The World the Shawnees Made by Dr. Stephen Warren, Resilience Through Adversity published by the Eastern Shawnee Tribe. So lots of books for sale. And then also too, some things like we have tribal artists producing jewelry, like Heidi Big Knife, who works in gold and silver, really beautiful stuff. She has produced some custom pieces for us to sell at Great Council. And then I'm also trying to find more tribal artists who would be willing to resell as well. So
You just mentioned a couple of books, and that was going to be my question, if you would recommend one or two books about the history of the site and the Shawnee people here.
Yeah, I have actually a suggested reading list of about 40 or so books. But,
How much time left?
yeah, I mean, and that's the other thing too, is even though we have books for sale at Great Council, we also will have a very small sort of library of books that are relevant to the site and to Shawnee history, available just to sit and read, as well as QR code links to a lot of these sources. So if you're walking through the gallery space and you're reading a panel about Tecumseh, for example, at the bottom of that panel, there will be a QR code that you can scan with your phone, that will take you to our ODNR webpage, that has an expanded bit of information that we couldn't fit on the panel, and also links to some suggested reading about that topic as well. So everything will kind of have that expanded content and suggested reading for that, if you want to go track those things down on your own. So
The Greene County Library should be alerted, they're probably already alerted to stock some of these books.
that's a great suggestion. Yes, thank you. Yes.
Could you remind me real quick what the difference between the red and the green zones are there?
Yeah, so the red, what's highlighted in red is what we own as Great Council State Park. So that is the ODNR property that makes up the state park. It's about 15 acres. And then this other acreage back here is owned by the Little Miami Conservancy. And we have an agreement with them to connect to their existing trail system. So yeah, we own and operate this and maintain these trails, and then the Little Miami Conservancy operates this preserved land back here, and we will co-manage that trail. Yeah. Yes.
I was wondering, you were saying earlier that Tecumseh would not have a panel, or he would not be part of the team?
He is interpreted. So when I was talking about Tecumseh, I know a lot of people have maybe heard that Tecumseh was born in Old Chillicothe. There's a lot of historical mythology, not necessarily specifically about this site, I would say more generally the area. So one of the more prevalent ones, that's not factually probably not true, is that Tecumseh was born at Old Chillicothe. So I get to use my very briefly, I promise this will not be long, right? So I just want to show you specifically this document here. Oops. So this red line is the what we call a proclamation line in a rough PowerPoint sketch. This was supposed to be the line of division between the colonies and Indian territories in the west. The yellow dot is the previous Chillicothe town on the Scioto River, near modern day like Circleville, for example. And then the blue dot is our Old Chillicothe, established in 1777. Does anybody know what year Tecumseh was born-ish? Around 1768. Old Town, our Old Town was established in 1777. It's hard to be born at a place that doesn't exist for another 10 years or so, right? That's the only 18th century image of a Shawnee person that exists that we can document really thoroughly. And here we go. That's actually more likely a painting of Tecumseh's son, not him himself, but we won't get into that. This document is a scan of a letter from Duncan MacArthur to Benjamin Drake in 1821. And what he says right here, he says, when on the way from Greenville to Chillicothe, this is the Ohio capital, Chillicothe, at this time that he's writing about, the Tecumseh pointed out to us the place which he was born, which was an old Indian town on the northwest side of the Mad River, about 6 or 7 miles below Springfield. Pretty much everybody in the period, everybody that writes about the birth of Tecumseh, when he becomes famous, just like we do today, they want to know everything about it, right? And so Duncan MacArthur, Benjamin Drake, and more specifically, the person whose kind of compilation this comes from, they are putting together this biography of Tecumseh, and everybody says the same thing, that he was born around 1768 in the springtime, and he was born in a Peckaway town on the Mad River. The only person who does not specifically say that he was born in Pickwood Town on the Mad River is, oh shoot, his name, well, Eckert pulls from this, is, I keep wanting to say Spencer. It's not Spencer. I apologize that I can't remember the name, but there's only one person who doesn't specify that he is born in a Peckaway Town on the Mad River, and that is this person. I was hoping it would come to me, but he says that he was born in the neighborhood of Old Chillicothe in the year 1768, and he goes on to describe some early parts of his life. But this is decades in the future that he's giving that statement. Old Chillicothe is by far the more famous of the two places. I was born in Miami, Oklahoma. I live in Yellow Springs, for example. But if I'm talking to somebody in Oklahoma, I'm going to say I live in Dayton, simply because they probably know where that's at, right? So by this person saying he was born in the neighborhood of Old Chillicothe, you probably know where that is. You may not know where the Peckaway Town on the Mad River is. So that's why every really credible bit of historical information that has anything to do with the birthplace of Tecumseh points to this town in what is now Clark County, at George Rogers Clark County Park, not at Old Chillicothe. So,
Clarify what you mean by Peckaway?
yeah, so the Peckaway Town, or Pequot Town, that is the name of that town. So there are kind of common titles for Shawnee towns. You'll see like Chillicothe, Pickaway, Miquelchee, Kispoko. Those are kind of common names for Shawnee places. They have a sort of relationship to some politics and sort of political divides within the community. But they evolved from being place names, and then after removal, when we're being removed, identifying with the place that you sort of came from, they evolve into more social concepts later. It's a complicated story, but it's a place name. So Pickaway was a place name of a Shawnee town on the Mad River that was established in the late 50s, early 60s. And then Chillicothe, again, same sort of thing, a series of towns that was established here in Ohio, in Indiana, in West Virginia, in Kentucky, in Maryland, in Virginia, Indiana, I said Indiana, Illinois, Missouri, and Oklahoma. So when you hear the word Chillicothe, historically, they were all over the place. So.
Pickwa, Ohio, a lot of people refer to as Pickwa.
Yeah, same Shawnee word. As a matter of fact, it's the exact same Shawnee word. In the Miami version of it, there was a town built there, what is now modern day Pickwa, Ohio. There was a Miami town built there in 1748 under the control of Miami named Old Britain. And it was destroyed in 1752 by Charles de Langlade. And you also may know Lake Loramie, like Lake Loramie State Park. That's right there in that area too. Peter Loramie, as he's called, Pierre Louis de la Lorimier III, as he's really known. He was a trader who came down out of Detroit. He married a Shawnee woman and actually moved to Cape Girardeau and established the Shawnee town there, right across the river from what is now St. Louis, Missouri. So another cool Shawnee connection. What other questions? Yep.
Will the buildings that are behind the Great Council, will those be removed?
So there are a couple of buildings. So this is the interpretive center right here. We have a house right there, as well as some outbuildings, like some sheds and stuff like that, and then a large barn. I'd really prefer for them not to be removed. I'll tell you what my hope was for those buildings. Excuse me. I do think that the house is going to go. I'm still pushing for the barn to stay. I would love to use it for outdoor programming space. I would love to use it for, like outdoor event space, like when we have groups come to the site. It's kind of right on the trail. It's accessible from the building, that's for sure. I would love to have it. The house, I don't think I'm gonna win the battle about the house. But if we're talking about bringing tribal citizens up to the site seasonally even, it's gonna be difficult for them on 1,000-hour positions to find places to stay in season. I would love to have kept that house and renovated that house to have sort of seasonal housing for tribal citizens coming up to work at Great Council. I thought that would have been really cool. I don't think that's gonna happen though. So trying to find other ways to make that happen. We are planning on building, I don't want to call it an observation tower, but it is another interpretive space that allows people to get a little bit higher. Actually, it was called a vertical trail. At one point, it was called on paper. I saw the word vertical trail being used to describe it. And I think it's about 25 or 30 feet tall. But due to the conservation easements on this area right here, we are not allowed to build any new structures that are not on the footprint of something existing. So if you wondered why the motel had to go, or why, you know, we're sort of keeping within what was already there, that's why. The conservation easements on the land don't allow us to build new structures or disturb new ground. We can only build on the existing footprints of what has already been there. So the house, the barn, the auto shop, and the motel, those are the existing footprints that we have to work with on our property. So I think the observation tower or the vertical trail will go where this house stood. Yes.
So, I'm wondering about the administrative structure. So you're a state park, which means you're part of the Ohio state park system. And there must be 100 layers of bureaucracy that you have to deal with. And you, when you talk about you push for something, you hope for something. So if you could just talk a little bit about what the system is like.
Sure. So because this is a brand new site, the system is sort of gelling now. For the last couple of years, I've been the only consistent person in the project. So I've bounced between central office in Columbus, reporting to vice chiefs and, you know, education managers, all the way to, like, I reported to Cedar Creek for a hot minute. I reported to John Bryan for a little bit. And then back to central office. But now, kind of as Great Council is coming together, it goes our frontline staff, naturalists, naturalist aides, tour guides, volunteers, etc., to me as the interpretive supervisor, and then to our park manager, Tim Pritchard, and then to our district manager, Melissa Clark, to our chief's office and vice chief. So our chief is Glenn Cobb, our assistant chief, John Dodney, and then to the director's office, Mary Mertz, and then, of course, the governor. Yeah, but it does feel like there's a lot of layers to that system. There's a vertical trail. So, but yeah, and it seems like I've been all over that trail there, so, but yeah.
Will it be a year-round facility?
It will be a year-round facility, yes. So, and we're trying to work out what that's gonna look like. Obviously, we're not your traditional state park, so we don't necessarily have a camping season or an off-season. We're more of a museum and interpretive center, so we have the ability to work with a much more indoor-focused space. So, you know, we have the opportunity to really, you know, interpret and work year-round. I am excited to do more seasonal programming, like, for example, like some of the interpretation that we had on the second floor in that Shawnee Hall, talking about the seasonality of Shawnee life and what's going on environmentally. It would be very cool to do some maple sugaring programs in the early spring. It would be interesting to do maybe some fur trade programs during the late summer to fall. It would be cool to work on some, like, a dugout canoe. Maybe if we could get the Division of Forestry to donate a nice cypress or poplar tree to have a dugout canoe to work on during the summer season. If we can get you know, archery equipment and backdrops and targets and training, it might be really interesting to do some traditional hunting tools and technology, like bows and adladdles and, you know, spear throwers and traps and that kind of stuff. So I think there's opportunity for year-round programming. And like I said, we don't have an off-season. We don't have camping. We don't have the sort of same natural resources focus that a lot of our other state parks do. So we will be doing year-round interpretation. Yeah.
So I'm wondering,
On the Teltharpy, living stream, there's like, it's like a tactile exhibit, like you can kind of like interact with some of the like fish and things. I'm wondering, is that something that's planned for this living stream as well?
Yeah, so the living stream at Great Council is planned to be interactive. You are able to get your hands in there, as far as I understand. So I would be very surprised if somebody pulled a fish out. I don't think the fish are going to allow that. You are able to get your hands wet. The artifacts that are hidden in the stream are secured to the substrate, so you won't be able to pull those out. There will be staff accompanying the living stream pretty much all the time, helping, giving instructions, making sure nobody goes head over heels, that sort of thing, right? So there will be staff with the living stream at all times, but it is planned to be hands. So, yeah.
There was a fish at the Teltharpy, living stream. No, it's still there, but I fondly remember the fish that lets you pet it.
Yeah.
Well,
Yeah. What else?
I have one.
Yes.
Well, I have two unrelated questions.
Okay.
One is, how long is that trail, the circle?
It's about a half mile. It's a half mile loop.
Okay.
So it's about a half mile out and a half mile back. So it's about a mile total.
Nice. Okay.
Yeah. And
One.
I was just gonna say, our trail coordinator, his name is Mark Allen. He used to work for Five Rivers Metro Parks. He spent a lot of time sort of trying to figure out, I imagine him in an office with like balls of yarn, trying to like figure out how to lay out these trails. And he said this was a challenge, especially with such a short space to work with. But he was able to squeeze just over a mile into what we have currently. And this will be mowed trail. So all of this here that we have that is actually our property, we are working to restore it to native prairie, specifically savanna oak prairie that would have been the native habitat for the environment during the 18th century. I have a talk coming up in 2 weeks, April, it's the end of April, with the Beaver Creek Wetlands Association, about specifically the native habitat of Ohio, settlement patterns, and sort of how this will sort of highlight some of that. So this will all be restored. We've already planted native seed. We are working on maintaining that, and then we'll be trying to convert the property that we have to savanna oak prairie. And then the second question.
On the artist rendering of the building, I noticed there's like spikes coming off the roof. What's all that?
So these sort of spikes that you see are the sort of crossed rafters. So if you look at like the actual building itself, there's kind of an outer shell. If you can think about it in two pieces. There's the inner sort of occupied part of the building, right? Where the windows and the paneling and all of that is, that contains about the 13,000 square feet of the interpretive center. And then this outer sort of ghost shell, if you will, represents the sort of rafter framework of the traditional council house. So that represents the sort of log poles of the traditional building.
Yeah. You said it was bomb proof. More important, it should be tornado proof.
That's a good point. Yeah. So, yeah.
What about the traffic situation on 68? Is that going to be addressed?
ODOT is working on that. Not something that I know much about, but I do know that ODOT has been a part of the project for a couple of years now, and anything that we do that impacts the flow of traffic, ODOT is aware of, and they are giving their recommendations on. So it was partially, I believe, their idea to incorporate some kind of crossing over 68, so that we don't impede the flow of traffic any more than we probably will.
I traveling back and forth, it has been
Yeah.
construction, but then, it always is with construction, but just wondering for future, hundreds and thousands of people.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm interested to see. I live right on 68 and, I'm right on, I live on the bike path side, so, and right on the Little Miami side. So I'm tempted to just take a canoe to work. Touch 68. But yeah,
One of these days you might have.
any other questions? Any other questions about Great Council or what's gonna be there or? All right then. Thank you very much.
Put in his other PowerPoint presentation as well.
Oh.
Now, when you'll be doing that, but that's pretty good. But
Yeah, it was all about the history of Old Chillicothe and sort of was there. So I would love
we'll
to come
sign you
at some
up,
point.
okay, for another Thursday night.
Sure.
So thanks for coming, everybody, and hope you come, to hear Carolyn talk about future plans next month.
Thank you.